I get a call from Khalid's engineer. He's like, the vocals are all wrong, this mix is wrong. My studio stuff is in my kitchen, but that's where the party was taking place. So I put my headphones on and I finished the vocal mix with this party happening around me, and people were just like bringing me shots and stuff. And I was sat in the corner of this room like, just go away, like, I need to finish this. And then I submitted it and I was pretty leathered when I submitted the mix. So when I woke up in the morning, I was like, oh God, I hope it's good. And then luckily it was all right. Hi, I'm S.G. Lewis, and this is my life in songs. I remember making Warm really clearly because me and Sophie Cook, also known as Frances, who's an amazing singer and songwriter, both went to the same university. We were on holidays, I think it was summer holidays or something, and we made Warm in the attic of my parents' house. And I remember my mum coming up and offering to make lunch. So it was there was no studio even, it was kind of just a set of monitors and a microphone. I remember we made the song, and originally I was gonna keep it in the original key and then have Sophie's vocal in there, but she was signed at the time and I couldn't clear the feature, so I was like, well, if I pitch down the vocal, can I use her vocal? And they're like, yeah, sure, do what you want. So that's how the vocal ended up being this kind of deep pitch down vocal. I put the track out and very little happened at first, no one was really listening to it. And then this guy called Scott Venner hit me up on Twitter and he was like, I'm gonna put your track in my TV show. And I didn't really know what HBO was at the time. It's pre-streaming era, so I didn't know anything about American TV. So I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. I'd had a song in a TV show before, but it was in the background of the golf on the BBC or something, and it hadn't changed my life. But he kept messing with me. He was like, are you ready? This is gonna change everything. And I was like, who is this guy? And why does he keep messaging me? So then the show goes out as Ballers on HBO, and Dwayne Johnson, the Rock, was starring in it. And then he told me to stay awake for when it went out, so it was 3 a.m. UK time, and I'm just in bed with my phone, I'm just staring at it. And then the moment happens, and my phone just blew up overnight, and then it did the most Shazams off any TV show that year or something. It was crazy, and then all of a sudden there was a bunch of people listening to the song, and then all of a sudden I was on the Coachella lineup and I didn't have a clue what I was doing. So just after the Yours EP, I took a little break from releasing while I figured out what I wanted to do next. I think a lot of people expected me to go straight into an album, but I just didn't feel that there was a concept that I wanted to kind of explore in a full-length project yet. But I was on the tube one day and this idea came to me of what would it look like if you were to make a project that kind of followed the 3 different parts of a night out. So dusk, dark and dawn was kind of the idea that I came up with. The music at the start of the night, the middle of the night and the end of the night. And there's kind of 3 different parts of 3 different energies and tempos in my head. So I went about starting to make it, and dusk was the first one. So I had the majority of dusk written, and I think it was due in the end of that week or something. And I got into the studio with Jay Warner, and his keys player Dan Diggers came down with him. So they just got off a flight or something, so Dan fell asleep at the back of the room. So me and Jay started writing. It started coming together really quickly. I had some chords down, and then we just started writing the lyrics, and it happened really quickly. The song kind of appeared within 45 minutes to an hour, and it was sounding great. And then all of a sudden, Dan woke up at the back of the room, and he sort of stumbled over to the piano, and he just started playing. And I was like, whoa, what was that? And he was like, I don't know, it's just jamming along. He's an amazing jazz pianist. So then I took my phone out and just recorded him playing on the voice notes app, and then basically just dropped the voice notes recording on top of the drop part of the song, and it fitted perfectly. So I was like, oh cool, and that's the piano solo that you can hear in it. Sunsets Part 2 came first, and again it was a partnership with Sophie Cook, who I've written a lot with, and has been a musical sibling of mine over the last couple of years. It was a song that I had for ages, and it was a song that I knew that I loved, but I remember at the time, I don't know if it was label situation, but I got some feedback that like that wasn't the song that I remember being really keen on that song and just not having that reciprocated across like opinions that I got, and it kind of knocked my confidence in my own opinion and the song for a while. So then I sat with it, but then when I was putting together Dusk, it was obviously topically Sunset's Dusk. Like I was like, yeah, this would be great. So I worked on it, and again was like fiddling with Sophie's vocal and kind of it's like ever so slightly pitched down, but it just ended up being this really emotive kind of piece of electronic pop music that even to this day a lot of fans at shows that kind of ends up being, you know, a lot of people's kind of favourite song, and I'm still really proud of it. So I met Aluna in LA. It was when I first started going to LA to write, and I hadn't met many British people over there, so it was kind of like comforting to even like meet another British person out there. So we met, you know, we sort of jumped straight into it, and at first the music wasn't really flowing, and she was like, let's go get some food. So then we sat down, we were eating burritos and just like actually getting to know each other. And then once we got back, the music then kind of happened very quickly. And again, it was like we sort of started with nothing in the room, but I started playing the bass line, and then she started singing. And then Aluna's very involved in like the production in terms of like she has opinions on like every kind of sound and stuff, so that was really cool as well to see how her mind works. But the track came together really quickly, and then it was part of the second part of that 3-part project, Dark. But it's a fun one, definitely. Throwaway, me and Clairo had worked together on a song previously, Better, and a lot of people had been really into the track, and we'd sort of become friends anyway, just through working together. And we're both in LA, and we were at the studio one night, and I'm not even sure we were necessarily intending to work on anything, but I just started playing the chords on that kind of plucky sound, and then Clairo's such an amazing songwriter, that kind of hook came together like really quickly. I wanted to make it almost like a little electronic like lullaby. It was like very down tempo, and it's funny because, you know, I think when people are thinking about songs that reach a lot of people, it's always like big, like dramatic pop songs with loads of energy, but like that song is so intimate and understated, and I think it's done like the most amount of streams of like any of my songs on Spotify, but it's kind of just I don't know, I think it's testament to the fact that you can like try and manufacture like something being big or successful, but I think something just being honest makes it connect more, I think. There's a good story behind Experience, actually. I think I'd started to collect a lot of disco music, and I was reading a lot about disco music, so I think I'd started to collect sounds that made me kind of feel like music from late 70s New York and stuff. So, but it was super early in that kind of process and exploration of that sound. So I had never met Victoria Monét before, and it was the day before the Grammys, and she was up for a bunch of Grammys with Ariana's stuff. So she got to the studio and she was like, we have 90 minutes. She was like, this on this crazy like pre-Grammy day. She was like, I've got to go to this brunch. And I literally had her for like 90 minutes. So we talked for half an hour, and then it's like, right, we got to get down to this. So it happened so quickly. Like the beat was like 15 minutes, and she just grabbed a scratch mic, and she was kind of just like humming like words that weren't quite sensical. And then she sort of put down the verses, and then we had this hook, and then I just kind of thought they were scratch takes. We were kind of just like, and then she was like, oh, I gotta go, and she was gone. And I'd hardly even had a moment to process whether it was like good or not. And then I sort of sat back and was playing it for an hour, and I was like, oh, this is really cool. And then I was only just able to hear what she was even like saying, because she was like singing quietly. So anyway, we didn't touch the song for like 6 months, and then Michelle, our manager, hits me up and is like, oh, Khalid's doing a verse on it. Can you send the parts? And I was like, what? Anyway, so Khalid writes his stuff, and then I thought I'd finished the track basically. It had been sent off, and then I was at a party, I was having a party actually, I had a load of friends in my flat, and everyone's like playing music and like, just, like having a great time, and then I get a call from Khalid's engineer. He's like, the vocals are all wrong, this mix is wrong. So I had to, because my studio stuff is in my kitchen, but that's where the party was taking place. So I put my headphones on and I finished the vocal mix with this party happening around me, and people were just like bringing me shots and stuff, and I was sat in the corner of this room like, go away, like, I need to finish this. But and then I submitted it, and I was pretty leathered when I submitted the mix. So when I woke up in the morning, I was like, oh God, I hope it's good. And then luckily it was all right. Me and Sophie started the basis of Sophie Cook, who I've mentioned a few times. So we started the basis of what would become Hallucinate. We were writing at Metropolis Studios, and we kind of started, and Sophie had to leave like half an hour in or something, so we just had the kind of very basis of it. It was one of those ones that we did, and we were like, okay, cool, like move on to the next thing. And then I sort of kept coming back to it, and I was like, oh, this is quite good. And then I knew Dua from sort of the last couple of years before that anyway, just like socially, and we sent it over to her, and they were responsive, so we got in the room with Dua to finish the track and work on the idea. And she's incredible in the studio, you know, she has like so many ideas and is such a pro on the mic in terms of like, you don't do any take like more than 3 times. It's like she's got complete control of her voice and knows exactly the limits of her range, and the process is just like a really easy, fluid one in the studio with her. So we wrote the rest of the song, finished it up, and then Stuart Price did some additional production on it, which was awesome because he's like a production hero of mine. And then yeah, it was on the album, but obviously the album sort of became this massive thing. It became bigger than, you know, I think anyone could have even contemplated. So you know, it ended up getting a bunch of like Grammys and stuff. So yeah, it was just a really cool moment to be a part of, and like a cool record to be able to have played a small part in, because I think it will be a record that people will look back at, and it will sort of represent a moment in time to a lot of people, especially with like lockdown and then the end of lockdown and stuff. So I sort of went straight into writing the next album after the release of my first one, because mainly out of boredom. I originally intended to like take a bunch of time off and go and like soul search and all that, but then I was stuck at home, so then I was like, well, I've really got nothing to do but make music. So I went straight into the studio and started writing, and this kind of concept emerged of this an album that sort of was split into 2 worlds of kind of lust versus love, and one being this kind of rushy, toxic version of love and relationships versus this more fulfilled, actualized, longer lasting version. And once I kind of created these 2 worlds and their kind of sonic identities, I would then go into the studio with collaborators and explain this concept, and then that would kind of set the intention for the studio session based on that conversation. Like, so I would start to build an idea instrumentally, and then often the sonics of that idea would then lead to the lyrics and the context of the song, because of like the feeling would kind of lead the lyrics. So I had a session in Diary for, I'd met Ty before, and then I'd worked with Lucky Day previously, but it's the first time we were all getting in the studio together. So they all came down to my studio, and they all have a few people with them. Like Ty has a bit of a crew of him, and then Lucky has his people. So my studio is pretty small, so all of a sudden it was like pretty crowded in there. But we're all in there, and then I had this idea that I'd started with Connor Albert, who's an amazing multi-instrumentalist, producer, and I played it, and that was the idea that both Lucky and Ty were just like vibing on. So we started writing, and then it all kind of came together in pieces, and then all of a sudden like Lucky and Ty were kind of going 1 for 1 on the mic, and I was kind of just trying not to mess it up. I was just like, because watching it come together was amazing. And but they were all smoking in the room, and I was getting pretty like secondhand high in the room. So towards the end of the session, I like span around in my chair because Ty went to high-five me, and I pulled the laptop like off the table, so that the laptop nearly died and I nearly lost the track. But luckily I didn't. So it was very smooth. We had a session in the diary a couple of times at Move, but we hadn't met. And then we'd just been meaning to work together for a while. I went to a Phoebe Bridgers concert and I started chatting to this guy, and we ended up on this night out, just like in LA after the show, and we were like, went to a bar and we were just like partying together. And then he turns to me at one point, he's like, oh, I think you're working with my wife soon. And I was like, who's your wife? And he's like, Tove Lo. And I was like, oh. So basically, I become fast friends with Charlie, her husband. So by the time we got in the studio, there was like this kind of like pressure almost of like, God, this is gonna be really awkward if this session goes badly now. Cause like, me and Charlie had been like, oh my God, like, and Charlie was like to Tove, oh, it's gonna go great, it's gonna be amazing. So then I was like, if this goes bad, it's gonna be really awkward. But we get in the studio and like, play some ideas, and I had like the basic of that idea that I'd started with Teed, and she just loved that idea, and we started writing straight away. And then, I mean, she's like an unbelievable writer. She's like just clinical and creative, and yeah, she's just one of my favorite writers I've ever worked with. So luckily it went okay. And then we worked together again on Pineapple Slice, but it was just like one of the most like fluid creative dynamics that I've ever like had in the studio. So yeah, super fun working with her.